the idea. We are one with Narayana, and so that is the whole thing here is very beautifully presented as the distance between oneself and Bhagavan is only self-ignorance. There is no distance time-wise, there is no distance space-wise either. If there is any distance, it is in the form of my own alienation, a feeling of being away from Brahman, away from Bhagavan, away from Ishvara, and what is that so-called distance is my own ignorance, where I refuse to recognize that out of this Narayana alone has come all the worlds, the seven continents, the seven bodies or land masses have come from this Narayana alone via this Maya Shakti. But that Maya Shakti, which is a power for Bhagavan, becomes a liability for the jivas because we take it for we take the jagat to be more real than Bhagavan. We take the jagat to be more real than Brahman. So then, if this much is understood, then we have to look at a couple more things before we get into the introduction. One is this, what is this called in the Sanskrit language? In the Sanskrit language, the introductory bhashya is called Upodghata bhashya. Upodghata means, and that also has a definition, Chintam Prakrita Siddhyartham Upodghatam Prachakshate. Chinta means the introspection, analysis. Chinta here is not worry, because in many Indian languages, vernacular languages, we think of chinta as some kind of a worry. Here it is not worry, it means deeply looking into, introspecting, analyzing, prakritam, prakrita siddhyartham, to understand understand the purport of what is in front of us. That is called upodghata. To have a better insight of what is in front of us. And of course, what was in front of Adi Shankara was, of course, the Bhagavad Gita. And then that is one thing. So now we know the meaning of Upodghata, introductory bhashya. And the introduction is, what we call introduction is not not this introduction. Here introduction is something very big, because in this particular introduction we have 23 sentences. Of course, they are very long and some of them are very involved. But in these 23 sentences, it's just the entire Bhagavad Gita is introduced. So you can imagine each sentence, when we unfold, it can turn into a manuscript by itself. It is so profound and so much full of meaning, and bringing in so many other sources. So then we have to see that these sentences, how are they strung together, and what does it mean to say this is bhashya? We can't write anything we want and call it bhashya. that won't do. It'll be like modern poetry. You just have one word in each line. The sky is blue. You have 4 lines, and then people call it poetry. Anything goes. But here in the our ancient ones were very particular about the definitions of what qualifies as bhashya, what qualifies as vartika, another kind of commentary. All this has it also, just like the word upodghata has a definition, the word bhashya also has a definition. Sutrartho varnyate yatra padaihi sutranusaaribihi swapadani cha varnyante bhashyam bhashyavido viduhu. So that which describes the meaning of the aphorism-like sentences. I mean, Bhagavad Gita is not aphorisms, it's not a sutra. But it's like what is that called? It's like certain sentences which are very pithy and small, and perhaps they don't explain everything. So such sentences are described in detail as swapadani cha varnyante, and one's own words are also explained. Not only the text, the Mula Grantha is explained, but one's own words are also explained. That is what is called the Bhashya. That is the definition of Bhashya. So now we know the Upodghata, now we know the definition of Bhashya also. So we can, with this understanding, we can appreciate all that has gone into this this beautiful nest of 23 sentences, in which is nestled the entire Gita Shastra and its purport. So he begins with a very interesting in a very interesting place. So he says, he starts with the word Bhagavan. So Bhagavan, Srishtva idam jagat, tasya cha sthitim chikirshuhu, मरीच्यादीनग्रे सृष्ट्वा प्रजापतीन् च प्रवृत्तिलक्षणं धर्मं ग्राहयामास वेदोक्तम्. So he says this Bhagavan created this universe, and having created the universe, you can't just sit back, relax and let go. You have to make sure it runs. And how do you make the universe run? Because the universe has a specific purpose. What is the purpose? To exhaust people's karmas. That is the purpose of the universe. It becomes a stomping ground for everybody's karma. And so to exhaust the people's karma, what do you need? You need a place. And so the universe becomes that place where everybody, whoever is there, with their own karmas, come and exhaust their karmas. And so now the universe has to go forward, and then it has to be maintained. How is the universe maintained? By the propagation of the species, including the human beings. The propagation of all the species is important, including the human beings. So therefore, Adi Shankara says that there was wishing the sustenance of the universe. Thitim chikirshuhu means wanting to, desiring the sustenance of this universe. What did he do? He created Prajapatis and Marichi, people like Marichi, etc., who would be following what is called pravritti dharma. Pravritti here means the pravritti means reaching out, going after things, fulfilling one's desire, having purusharthas, various ambitions and ideas and enthusiasm and pursuits. Pravritti dharma means pursuits, various pursuits. And so this is the pravritti dharma is important, because as long as people are pursuing things, then the universe it propagates itself, it maintains itself. Because what is the universe for? The universe is for people to eke out their karma. And so there is a set of people Bhagavan, they created this pravritti dharma for, and made those people such as Marichi, etc., to follow this kind of a pravritti dharma, means this kind of a life dharma here, lifestyle, this kind of a lifestyle. And then this lifestyle is not enough. Why? This is not the only thing that is there in the universe, because sooner or later, as the people are following their pet projects, their ideologies, their desires, as they are trying to fulfill those desires, what happens? What happens is that nothing happens. That's the whole point. They meet with disappointments. It's not easy to even fulfill one desire. What to talk of all these desires that we have? It's not easy to fulfill at all. And so therefore, the faced with repeated disappointments, then we have some people who analyze that disappointment, who introspect on this kind of all these problems, and then they are ready to give up everything. They are ready to just focus on the truth of themselves, because they know that this life is ephemeral. It is like a soda can. You open the soda can, and what happens? Whoosh, everything gushes out, and then after that everything is flat. So whatever I pursue, even though it is initially I have enthusiasm, after that what happens? It goes flat. I either don't get what I want, and then what I don't want I get a double helping of, or what I want I get but not exactly how I want it, and then I become connected to a kind of a loop: karma, action, karma phala, result of action I do not like, and therefore karma, again I initiate more action in order to stave off the disliked results of action. And then after that what happens? Again I do more actions, and then more result of action, more result of action, more action. I am in a loop, and this loop has a name. What is the name? Samsara. What is samsara? Where the one has to face some sorrow or the other. This is what samsara is. And so therefore, only having pravritti as the mainstay of the universe, the pursuit of pravritti, creating the pursuit called pravritti, is not enough. That would have been very neglectful of Bhagavan if he had left out the possibility that people who are sick of this karma phala dance and this big loop in which they see appear to be stuck. So therefore, what would they like to do? They would like to get out of this loop. And getting out of this loop is called moksha, freedom. So I want to get out of this loop. I'm sick of my life. I'm sick of my life because it seems to be just going round and round doing the same old things and expecting different results. I pursue the finite and expect infinite results to come. How is that possible? It's logically also impossible. And so therefore, the second dharma that was there is called Nivritti Lakshana Dharma. Dharma here, lifestyle. So then the Nivritti means withdrawal, because obviously what I'm doing is not helping. So I have to withdraw from what I'm doing, and then disengage, and then contemplate on the nature of the self, be instructed about who the truth of I is, who I really am. And if I am this wanting person, who is this wanting person? The one who keeps pursuing one thing or the other. Or if I am already a fulfilled person, this has to be ascertained. And the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, all of them, in fact, emphatically say that you, the jiva, are not a wanting person. What are you? You are a fulfilled person. You are a non-demanding, fulfilled, appreciative, accommodative person, an objective person. You are not a demanding, wanting person. And that itself is a big relief, and it's just a statement. But now I have to understand the profundity of this statement, and in order to do that, I have to follow another lifestyle. This is called Nivritti Lakshana Dharma. Nivritti means withdrawal. And same thing in the Kathopanishad is called Preyas and Shreyas. Preyas is Pravritti Lakshana. Shreyas, which is the pursuit of moksha, is Nivritti Lakshana. And so then sages, then who did this Nivritti Lakshana appeal to? The Nivritti Dharma appeal to? Nivritti Dharma appealed not to the people at large, the people at large were happy. Happy means unhappy, unhappily pursuing small ends which are actually dead ends. But some contemplative rishis, sadhus, etc., what did they do? They accepted or they embraced the nivritti dharma, which was an antidote to pravritti dharma for those who were ready. So beautiful this is. So dvividho hi vedokta dharma pravritti cha nivritti lakshanancha, he says. And he says this is not something coming out of my head. Adi Shankara says this is already there. This is in fact in the whole in the whole makeup of the Veda. The first portion of the Veda is a treatise of wish fulfillment. For every desire that I have, there is a yajna. So many yajnas, so little time. And if I follow the first portion of the Vedas, if anybody follows that true to the book, then keeping on putting ghee in the yajna, one will have repetitive stress injury, one will have shoulder problems. This is for sure, because that's how big that's how big the compendium of the human desires is, and that's how big the karma kanda, meaning the portion of the Veda solely devoted into for karma. How big it is, this is how big it is. And so therefore this is the first portion of the Veda. And then after that we have Jnana Kanda, where one gives up this karma for the sake of Atma Jnanam, for the sake of pursuing oneself, the truth of oneself, which one does not know. This is what one has to do. And so therefore these two things are there in the Veda. And then this is what he sees, this kind of a bifurcation of human interests and pursuits, the one geared towards geared towards outwardly pursuits such as name, fame, and everything short-lived and ephemeral, because the people don't know any better. And the second one, the inwardly pursuit, granting one, whose effect grants one the nishreyasa. Nishreyasa means moksha, freedom from pursuing itself, freedom from being a wanting, becoming person, freedom from poverty consciousness, freedom from scarcity mentality. All this is, and freedom, of course, after death, from rebirth, because the cause of birth is desires and various karmas. And these karmas are dropped in the wake of the knowledge, I am not the agent of action. And that, of course, will come much later. But here, this is enough to see that how the Veda is distinguished into the first, the Karma Kanda and the Jnana Kanda, known as Upanishads. He sees the same bifurcation in the Bhagavad Gita also. And then he says one more thing, which is iterated by Lord Krishna in the 4th chapter as well, and he seems to summarize that and channel that here. What does he say? Dirghena kalena, from a long time, these two margas, these two lifestyles, for preparation in order to go to the other place, well, the first lifestyle of fulfilling one's desires, growing in the pursuit of dharma. Here dharma means righteous living, etc. And the other one, which is the goal of human life, moksha, the ultimate goal of human life. Both are related to one another. In fact, the pursuit of one leads one to mature emotionally into the pursuit of other. But then what happened is that during the course of time, somehow the connection between the two, that when I pursue all these dead end objects, time bound objects, but I really want the timeless truth of myself, then I'm not satisfied, and then I come back to this introspective pursuit, that connection was somehow severed in the course of time. Why? Because kamodbhavat, he says. Kamodbhavat. So the two reasons he gives: because of the rise of all kinds of kama, desires, various kinds of desires, and then hiyamana viveka vijnana hetukena. So the other reason is that the decrease in discrimination, in discernment. There was a decrease in discernment, and then a concomitant rise in various desires, and then what happened is that because of this, abhibhuyamane dharme pravardhamane cha adharme, the dharma, the righteous life, righteous living, a life of a Vaidika life of values and attitudes, that went that went somewhere, that went out of vogue, and then along with that adharma rose. And in order to balance this, Bhagavan took a avatara called Krishna. The Krishna avatara was because of that. And then so this is nothing but Adi Narayana coming as in the form of a human life, in order to do this, in order to right this balance. And then what is that? He says, Brahmanatvasya hi rakshanena rakshita syat vaidiko dharma tad adhinatvat varnashrama bhedanam. So the protection of the people who practice these two lifestyles, their protection is equal to the protection of the lifestyle themselves. So when the dharmi is protected, dharma is protected. This is what he says. So when the dharmi, the person practicing the dharma is protected, then the dharmi is protected. This has in fact been true in all in everything in our lives, in the Hindu tradition, and that is one of the reasons why all the treatises along with the teaching tradition is alive, because it was all carried in our heads. It was not in any way put here or put there, or dependent upon manuscripts. The manuscripts came much later. It was all in our heads. And so there was no difference between the Hindu dharma and the dharmin. The one who practices the dharma, they were one. So therefore, you cannot destroy all the dharmis, and so therefore this contributed to the preservation of the knowledge and the teaching methodology, because of which we can enjoy the bhashya and enjoy how it has been taught by various acharyas in the parampara from centuries. And then then he says, then the next thing to see is that he says that Bhagavan did not get anything out of this universe. Out of creating this universe, nothing was gained by Bhagavan. Swaprayojana abhavepi. There was no prayojana for himself. But what was it? Bhuta anujigrakshaya. Jigrikshaya means anugraha. Desire to do anugraha for all the people, and to preserve these two lifestyles, which are the mainstay of the dharma, the one which is the one which is called pravritti lakshana. But then that also has a very important twist here. It's not just it is pravritti lakshana in the beginning, but then after its anushtanam, after practicing this particular pravritti lakshana dharma, then what do you have? You grow as a result. Your actions, your karma turns into yoga. It becomes a committed lifestyle for the gain of this knowledge. And this is what is there in the Ishavasya Upanishad as well. These two lifestyles are talked about. First one is Tena tyaktena bhunjitha. Nivritti lakshana is discussed first. Protect the self by giving everything up. Otherwise, the self just goes out of view, and then the mithya, the body, mind, sense complex, the non-self takes over the self. Anatma gains more validity than Atma. Then the second lifestyle that is talked about in the Ishavasya is what? Kurvanneva iha karmani jijivishe chatagum sama aha. So for the people who are not quite ready to give up everything and just be oneself and the sky, no stipend, nobody looking after you, nothing there, just you and the sky. If you are not ready for it, then you gradually become ready by giving up giving up the desires for the result of action. You catch the result of action in order to stop this loop of karma, karma phala, karma, karma phala. Karma you cannot avoid. Karma phala, how you receive the karma phala, you can have a say. You can have a say of how you receive the karma phala. You have to do something. As Bhagavan Krishna will say in the Bhagavad Gita, nahi kashchit kshanamapi jat tishtati akarmakrit. Nobody can sit even for 5 minutes, 5 seconds, without doing anything. So doing is there, but then I am not the doer. I have to come to this understanding. And the akartritva buddhi, the non-doership, is paradoxically gained through the right relationship I cultivate by the cultivation of the right relationship between action and result of action. Action cannot be avoided, result of action also cannot be avoided, but what can I do? I can interrupt how the loop by changing how I receive the result of action. I receive the result of action differently. I receive it as prasada. I use this result of action for my own growth. Because I cannot always do as I like, I learn to grow up to like whatever I have to do. This, in short, is Karma Yoga. And of course, I have to rely on Bhagavan. Without Bhagavan, what can happen? Nothing can happen. Zero progress. Because where will I take the disappointment? Where will I do this? And so this is the purport of the Bhagavad Gita. And Adi Shankara says this twofold bifurcation of first going and pursuing the desires, but learning through the first portion of the Veda to grow emotionally as a result, and to discipline the body, to discipline the mind, and to emotionally become a mature person. And that is the purport of the first portion of the Veda. And the second portion of the Veda is the reason, is the result of this maturity. And so that is what he says. And then he says that this is the purport of the Gita Shastra. And then he says, alas, he laments that people are not able to see this in the Bhagavad Gita. This Bhagavad Gita, where I see, Adi Shankara says, I see this bifurcation very, very clearly. I see these two lifestyles as complementary to one another, and I see everyone has an opportunity to grow and pursue moksha as a result of this. And this is exactly in keeping with the Veda and what is taught in the Upanishads. But then this is not what people see. Why? Because he said durvigneyartham, because it is supposed to be what? It is supposed to be difficult to understand. It is difficult to understand because of our own problems. Our own problems, it is difficult to understand. One's own resistance, one's own penchant for seeing things in a certain way, etc., it becomes difficult to understand. And he says, Tad artha avishkaranaya, to make clear. Avishkarana here is not discovery, to clarify, to bring out, to bring out the proper purport of the Bhagavad Gita, its commitment. What has happened? This is why I am, artha nirdharanartham sankshepatah vivaranam karishyami. I'm going to give a brief, what should I say, commentary. I mean, it's not brief at all, but in other words, he could have been longer, he could have taken longer, but he says he's settling for a brief commentary on the entire Bhagavad Gita. Why? Because many people have commented on it, and it has been analyzed thoroughly. Vivritta pada padartha vakyartha nyayam api atyanta viruddha anekarthakatvena laukikaihi grihyamanam. So he says, I have seen people, laukikas, regular people, wanting to go to the Bhagavad Gita with some hope and enthusiasm in their heart, but then what do they get instead? They get oppositional kinds of commentaries, each one opposing the other, each one having one-upmanship on the other, each one saying something, whatever they want to, they see. And this is true even of the later commentaries, not just the commentaries in Adi Shankara's time. Even in the later commentaries, we find that people just see whatever they want to see. Anything at all, whatever, anything goes, whatever they want to see, they see. Like, for example, they during the Indian War of Independence, during the freedom movement, all the freedom fighters saw what? Oh, the Bhagavad Gita is calling us to fight. Arjuna was asked to fight, so I also should fight, and so we also should fight. We have to throw off this British yoke on our heads, off our heads, off our necks, and so we all have to fight. This is what they took. And then somebody else said, do karma, do your duty. Somebody else said, that is the purport of the Gita. You have to, no matter what, you have to keep doing your duty. But what if I have understood and matured as a result of this duty? No, you still need to keep doing your duty. There is no other thing in life except keeping on doing what you're doing. That is all you have to do. And so such kinds of misunderstandings sort of says Adi Shankara, has given the desire for me to write the meaning, to write the meaning in such a way that the purport of it is understood. And then he says, from my standpoint, Gita is Moksha Shastra, not Karma Shastra. This is, if there is one takeaway, this is something we have to understand. It's Moksha Shastra. It is not Karma Shastra. There is no need for the person to be instructed in action. Why? Because the person who is sick of action is approaching the Gita. The person who doesn't know how to do the action properly and who is falling all over himself, herself, and who needs to be rescued from badly performed action and badly received results is the one is the audience for the Gita. Is the audience of the Bhagavad Gita. And if you tell the people that the purport of the Bhagavad Gita is karma, then it makes no sense at all. It is, so it's Moksha Shastra. He says, Param Nishreyasam Sahetukasya Samsarasya Atyanta Uparama Lakshanam. So what is this Moksha Shastra? That which is the attainment of the highest goal in the dharma, which results in the decimation of all worldly longings along with their root cause. What is the root cause? Samsara. And how is this achieved? It is achieved through the Tatcha Sarva Karma Sannyasa Purvakat Atma Jnana Nishtha Rupat dharmat bhavati. This he makes it very clear. This is a very beautiful portion in the Bhashya. So he says this is achieved by the observance of this lifestyle. What is the lifestyle? The lifestyle of twofold, two important things, two salient points in this lifestyle. First is that sannyasa karma, sarva karma sannyasa purvakat, the unflinching devotion to knowledge, which is preceded by the renunciation of the fruits of action. First, you let go of the fruits of action, then you become a proponent of Atmajnanam, then you become convinced that it's an internal pursuit, it's not an external pursuit, and then you get ready for this knowledge. This is what is the purport of the Bhagavad Gita. Nothing else is there here. And then, he says that so Gita is a moksha shastra, the main thing he says. And it is meant for people who are ready to let go of the results of action. And they are ready to first let go of the results of action and then be completely devoted to Atmajnanam, to the sole pursuit of Atmajnanam. And if this sounds intimidating, Adi Shankara is, as we know, is very, very compassionate. He doesn't leave the Bhashya right there. He could have well left the Bhashya right there and said, okay, here we are concluding, etc., etc. And after all, Western academics have accused Adi Shankara of being very, sannyasa friendly and being too sannyasa friendly, and then not having enough compassion or enough, and it doesn't give the time of day to grihastha. He does not talk about grihastha. He prefers sannyasa, and he just not only prefers, but he minces no words about saying that he prefers sannyasa alone. And then this is what he says. And then, but here Adi Shankara proves this wrong. Why? Because he says that look at who this Bhagavad Gita is being taught to. It is not being taught to a sannyasi. It is being taught to who? Arjuna. Who is what? Who is like everybody else in the world. He too is suffering from shoka and moha, from delusion and despair, despondency, faced with the prospect of killing all his kinsmen in the battle, and he wants something. He doesn't know what he wants. But he approaches Lord Krishna, says, I am your disciple. And so therefore what? So therefore Adi Shankara says, this is not the end of the Bhagavad Gita, even though this is the primary focus of the Bhagavad Gita is self-knowledge. It is a moksha shastra. And how is moksha shastra to be pursued? By giving up all other pursuits, taking this pursuit seriously, and then, immersing in Atmajnanam, exposing yourself to self-knowledge for a committed length of time. But that cannot be the end of the whole story, because how many people are able to do that? Nobody, very few, in fact. And you can count those people in one hand. And so therefore he says that abhyudayartha api yah pravritti lakshanah dharmah varnashramancha uddishya vihitah sa devadhisthana प्राप्ति हेतु अपि सन् ईश्वरार्पण बुद्ध्या अनुष्ठीयमानः सत्वशुद्धे भवति फलाभिसन्धि वर्जितः. Very beautiful, very important. And what he says, that this pravritti lakshana is not useless if it is followed according to how the Upanishad and the Bhagavad Gita tells us to follow. Then two things can happen. It can lead to the achievement of material prosperity, including the Devadhisthana, means including the gaining the status of celestials in the next life. It could lead to the attainment of material prosperity. After all, people want that. And they have a right to want that. There is nothing wrong in wanting that because they don't know anything better. And then at the same time, when they learn to do the same karmas after letting go of the results of action, phalabhisandhi varjitah, after not taking into account the fruits of action, and then doing what? Ishwararpana buddhya, giving this giving the action Ishwararpana buddhi, dedicating the action and the results of action to Bhagavan. If they do that, then what happens? They get ready for this knowledge. Because the strong preferences called raga in the Bhagavad Gita and the strong prejudices called dvesha in the Bhagavad Gita, both of them, what happens to them? They die away. They die away in the wake of this particular lifestyle called pravritti lakshana. If it is followed properly, if the anushtanam, the practice of this lifestyle is done well, these things fade away. The ragadveshas fade away, and then shuddha sattvasya cha jnana nishtha yogyata prapti dvarena jnanotpatti hetutvena cha nishreyasa hetutvam api pratipadyate. And then for the one who is free of raga and dvesha, they become fit to devote themselves through this knowledge, and then moksha becomes possible for whom? For the pravritti lakshana people also. This is what it is. It becomes very, very possible for the people with the pravritti lakshana also. And then, so this twofold dharma, he says, which with nishreyasa. Nishreyasa means what? Moksha. With moksha, and then what is the second lifestyle? The first lifestyle is jnana yoga for the sake of moksha. The second lifestyle is preparing for jnana yoga. This is what is the other one. And then the one is the preparation and one is the pursuit. The pursuit of knowledge requires preparation, because without pursuing, without the preparation, there is no knowledge possible. Every body of knowledge has some prerequisites. If you want to go to college, one should have finished high school, like that. If you want a PhD, one should have finished college. So like this, every body of knowledge begs some prerequisite. And so here, Atmajnanam is no exception at all. And this Adi Shankara has brought out very, very, very clearly. And it's just, it's just so crystal clear. It's very beautiful. So Dviprakaram Dharma, two kinds of lifestyles. And so therefore, and these two lifestyles have only one goal. This is another beautiful thing he has brought out. No other commentator has done this so well. The two lifestyle has only one goal. What is that goal? Freedom from being a wanting, becoming person. This is the thing. Samsara means I am never satisfied. Samsara means I'm always wanting, I'm always dissatisfied, I'm always under discontentment, I'm always under a cloud of shoka, sorrow and moha, delusional thinking. Because I don't know how to go about this life. I make wrong choices, I have no viveka, I have no vairagya, no discrimination, no dropping of things that are not needed, no idea of how to let go. And so what does one do as a result? One clings on to the finite, trying to make it infinite. The desire for the infinite, Adi Shankara points out, is not a human-made desire at all. It's not a human-made desire. And then what kind of a desire is it? It is a desire that is inbuilt. It is Bhagavat Ichha. It is Bhagavan's desire. It's not your desire. It is, see, there are two kinds of desires. My Guru, Pujya Swami Dayananda ji, used to say, one set of desires is called cultivated desires. And what are the cultivated desires? Like, so wanting to eat in a particular restaurant, cultivated desire. Flat screen TV, cultivated desire. AI, cultivated desire. These are all cultivated desire. But then the desire for food, uncultivated desire. The desire for shelter, uncultivated desire. Desire to be protected from the elements, rain and cold and all this, uncultivated desire. And so, and this is very clear that they are uncultivated desire, because when the baby comes out of the mother's womb, it does not think, oh, up till now I was fed by the mother, now the umbilical cord will be cut, and then what will happen to me? I better bring a sandwich along or a bottle of milk. It doesn't think that. It comes out into the world. And then the mother's milk is right there, and we see this in National Geographic videos. When the small animals are born, baby animals are born, baby giraffe and baby hippo, all these things. Without GPS, they even though sometimes they are born with their eyes closed, without GPS they are able to locate the mother's milk and immediately go there. It is all uncultivated. Similarly, the desire to be free of being a finite wanting person is also uncultivated. In other words, Adi Shankara points out that one is hardwired for moksha. And for the Bhagavad Gita to be seen as anything other than giving this Nishreyasa Prayojana, whose objective is just is giving freedom from this life of becoming, from this life of being enslaved by one's desires. If you don't see this in the Bhagavad Gita, Adi Shankara says, you are doing the Bhagavad Gita a great disservice. You are doing injustice to the Bhagavad Gita if you don't see this at all. You have to see this. And the object, so this is the beauty of it, the objective, the ultimate objective of both the lifestyle is moksha. The lifestyles do not have different divergent purposes, is not there. This is what people think, that oh, you are into Vedanta and I am just into this, you are into Shreyas, I am into Preyas. This is not the truth. This is just an apparent perception. It's an apparent reality. The truth is that both the lifestyle serve the purpose of getting freedom from the shackles of being a wanting, unfulfilled person, thinking of oneself as having self-judgment and having self-loath, having criticism, self-critique, etc. So therefore, the objective is the same. And there are two ways of approaching this objective. If one is ready to drop everything and to be committed to this knowledge, then for you that lifestyle is called Jnana Yoga, or sometimes it's also called Sankhya Yoga in chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita. But if one says, come on, this is too much, I can't, I'm a doer. I have to do something. I can't just sit still. I have to do I have to help the society. I have to do something or the other. I have to contribute. I have these skills. If you are thinking like that, nothing wrong, says Adi Shankara. For you also, the ultimate goal is moksha. But what are you doing? You are approaching it slowly by first gaining the preparation, by first gaining the calmness, the tranquility of mind, a focused mind, a tranquil mind, and a mind free of your own agenda. You're getting that through the practice of karma. Through the practice of karma, the right kind of karma deployed in the right way and the right kind of attitude for the results of karma, you become qualified for moksha because your mind is now free of ragadveshas and your mind is also is ready to focus on the knowledge through the bahiranga sadhana, the outward focus, the outward sadhana called karma yoga, and inward sadhana called antaranga sadhana, japa, etc. And so, therefore, he says the proper understanding of this Bhagavad Gita, the meaning of the Bhagavad Gita is important. Why? Because it leads to fulfillment in human life. The ultimate fulfillment in human life is not something that is achieved after death. In this way, we are different from many other traditions. The ultimate goal of human life is Jivan Mukti, to be free while alive and to enjoy a Shoka free, Moha free existence. No delusion, no sorrow, no self loath, no self criticism, no self judgment. And then he says, therefore I have put a lot of effort into this. Ataha tad vivarane yatnah kriyate maya, by me. And the very beautiful thing is, this is one of the rare places Adi Shankara uses the first person. Aham, he says in one place, and then Maya, by me. Aham, I am going to write this, he says. Earlier, it's a very rare aham it is. He usually says, it's very impersonal. He says, Uttara Grantham Arabhyate, Purva Grantham Arabhyate. This section is begun. He can say that. Usually he says that, but here he takes this very personally. You find Bhashyakara, Adi Shankara, taking this very personally and giving it his all. Somehow nurturing this lamp called the Bhagavad Gita with his own two hands to make sure that its purpose and its purport is not at all lost. In fact, because of Adi Shankara's introduction and because of how he treats the entire Bhagavad Gita, this knowledge which was becoming out of vogue, which people were either too lazy or distracted to follow, has been rekindled with the fire of Bhashyakara's warm gaze, his warm, compassionate gaze to lift up humanity from the doldrums of samsara is itself has kindled this fire in every heart to study the Bhagavad Gita exactly how it should be studied. And so I end with this prayer that may everyone gain this nishreyasa phalam, may everyone gain moksha, may all be happy, and may everyone be filled with compassion and loving kindness. Om Tat Sat. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Namaste Swamini. It was a very nice lecture. Reconciliation of Jnanat Evatu Kaivalyam Vastu Siddhi Vicharena Natashchit Karma Koti Bhimi with Nahi Deha Bhrita Shakyam Tyaktum Karmanya Keshataha. Beautiful. The Upodghat is very important. Pravrutti Lakshana, Nivrutti Lakshana, both are not Samuchay. Jnana Karma Samuchay, even if it is not there, Jnana Karma Samanvaya is definitely there. So it was fantastic. I liked it very much, and I am sure that you are also must have liked it very much. Thank you. I will close the session by a prayer. Om Sahanavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Mavitvishavahai ओम शांति शांति शांति। हरि ओम तत्सत्। श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। हरि ओम।